For 2019, in order to reduce downforce and make the aerodynamics a little less sensitive to following another car, the big changes came at the front of the car. First, the front wing got simplified significantly. You would see all the end plates became far simpler and in terms of geometry, more or less prescribed, highly constrained. The wing became a bit wider, such that it's a bit easier to control the airflow going around the front tire. The other bit which got modified were on the front brake duct. Essentially, in the previous years, teams had developed ways to blow airflow through the axle, which we call the blown hubs, and that was quite powerful to generate outwash, but again, was quite sensitive when you would follow someone. Then the barge board themselves got reduced in height. Alongside these changes at the front of the car, there was also a change at the rear of the car. The rear wing got to be higher, a bit wider. But the intention for that was literally for the drivers to be able to see what's happening behind them, which again affected their ability to race other cars. Because it's fair to say, if we have freedom in aerodynamics, we design the mirrors for aerodynamic performance, not necessarily for the driver to see. And in the previous set of regulations, it was obvious the best location for the mirror in terms of performance was somewhere when the driver looked in the mirror, he would see his rear wing. He would see nothing else. Also in 2019, there was another change on the tires where purely modified the thickness of the tread just to make the tire a little more resistant to overheating. Because in 2018, there were quite a few races which were fairly high energy. You would see tires blistering quite a lot. So this new tire for 2019 looked again quite benign, just very small reduction in thickness, but it gave large differences in how the tire behaved thermally. So then teams had to redevelop quite a lot all the tire management tools in the car, mostly speaking the front and rear brake ducts. So this kept being more and more of a challenge for the teams just to maintain the tire in the optimum temperature window. In 2018, we had a set of regulations trying to back off the amount of downforce the cars were carrying through simplifying the aerodynamics. But really, when we got to the end of 2019, through development, we still had faster cars than the year before. There was this ever-growing downforce level these cars would generate. The more you would learn how best to extract performance, how to optimize all your devices, it seemed like the potential was always greater and greater the more you learned. So for 2020, nothing really changed. The cars remained very much consistent, the regulations remained consistent because there was the big change of regulations planned for 2021 with the new ground effect cars or the research being done upstream. It was mostly about turning the wheel of development as fast as you could, getting more extreme with the designs, more extreme with some details. And in 2020, we saw the fastest cars these regulations would bring. Then, with the COVID coming among us, the new regulations got delayed by 1 year. By delaying the regulations by 1 more year, we had to find a way such that the teams would not have to redesign a complete new car. The downforce would genuinely be reduced to make sure the tires remain in the normal operating window. And to try and contain developments, there was also a significant chassis freeze for 2021, which came along the lines of a new token system. For a few areas of the cars, got assigned a sort of token price, and each team would have 2 tokens to spend. As a team, you had to decide on which end of the car you would spend your 2 tokens. the front or the back, being fully aware the other end would be identical to 2020. And then in parallel came the final definition of what the aerodynamic regulation would change. And it came as a significant simplification of the floor edge. The floor ahead of the rear tires became a bit narrower, and all the complex flow management features like fences and gills which we had developed, all this had to go away. In itself, the change of floor width ahead of the rear tires looked fairly benign, but when you look at what it did to the aerodynamics of the car, it was very significant. We had spent years developing all the details ahead of the tire to manage the airflow around the rear tires and make sure the diffuser is in the best possible conditions to perform. With the floor trim, we also had a small reduction on a span of the winglets attached to the rear brake duct. This had a fair effect in itself, but not as dramatic as the floor trim. So looking back at this generation of cars from 2017 to 2021, it seems like we may have reached a very high level of performance, a very high level of downforce, but also a very high level of complexity. These cars we had in 2021, but especially 2020, were incredibly fast, incredibly exciting from an engineering point of view, but I can also see why for the drivers it was a bit frustrating when you follow someone or you arrive behind someone, you know you're faster because you've got better tires or you're a better driver, and you just cannot overtake just because the car is too sensitive and it does not allow you to get closer. So this was the clear requirement for the new 2022 generation of cars. Making the cars a bit simpler, a bit more compliant from the driver's perspective, to be able to race closer, to not suffer from so much aerodynamic loss behind another car, was the clear intention for 2022. I think the concept is proving very different aerodynamically. It has very different characteristics, and I think for everyone involved in designing these cars, I think the future challenges are quite exciting.